ask you if you mind it. Well, good morning. Here we are. We're all ready to do our curriculum interview meeting, and we've got some great people here. My name is Holly Murphy, and I am the Assistant Director of Special Education with Etowah County Schools and JSU student working on my EDS. We have with us Ms. Towns. Tell us about yourself.
Hi, everybody. I'm Christy Towns. I am also working on my EDS. I'm currently the principal at Whitesboro Elementary School, Etowah County. Great to have you all here today.
Hi, my name is Zach Gilliland. I'm a teacher at Sardis High School, currently working on my EDS as well. We have gotten with us, we've compiled 3 guests to be with us today. I'm going to introduce one of them, and then I'll let Miss Murphy introduce the other 2 or whoever. The introduction I'd like to make is for Mr. Elliott. He is a teacher here at Sardis High School as well. I'll let him introduce himself, tell you what he teaches at this time.
Hey, I'm Troy Elliott. I just finished my 8th year of teaching all at Sardis High School. I teach 9th grade English, regular and pre-AP, and do 2 elective classes at Sardis Middle School as well.
Well, it's good to have you here, Troy. I'm glad you're here with us today. I think you've been in a couple of IEP meetings with me at the high school a time or 2. I'm really excited we have Dr. Melissa Shields from the State Department. She's here with us, and I'll let her tell a little bit about herself.
No, I feel like this is a reunion. I'm trying to have to kind of like fight back the emotion here. Troy, what? 8 years? Is that right? Like, I remember when you were that new teacher putting all those really funny notes on your door. Do you still do that?
Yes. And for the record, you still kind of scare me a little bit. You intimidate me a little bit. So. Okay,
good. Let's keep that. Let's keep that. That's a good thing. My children say that too, and maybe my husband a little bit. It's great to see y'all. So it's a little awkward, but so I lead the school improvement for the entire state. On normal circumstances, I'm driving 3 to 6 hours every single day. I leave the house about 5:15. I get home about 6, but I have made the most wonderful, awesome friends all over the state. My job is almost exactly what my old job was in Etowah County. Because most of my work is in the area of curriculum. I do a lot of work with social emotional learning, trauma-informed instruction, AP. My job is just to go to the schools and the districts and say, how can I be a blessing? What can I do to help? And I stay with them till 11 o'clock at night, getting transcripts done, whatever I have to do. And then I bring really awesome people to the table to help them. And so I supervise a number of people, including literacy coaches, principal coaches, my staff, of course. Dr. Mackey is my boss, and he is really supportive of our work. And I don't have to tell you guys, I'm known for being a bit of a rule breaker. And I'm really lucky that, Dr. Bice, I think he recruited me to this position, and he told me, he said, break rules, break all kinds of rules, just shake things up, make people mad. And that's what I do. And Dr. Mackey is really supportive of that too. So, I got a great job. It's made me an old woman very fast. But in my previous life, I was a curriculum director, of course, for Etowah County. One of the best jobs I ever had. I miss it every day. I miss my friends. I miss it. I miss it. Before that, I was an English language arts teacher. Christy, you need to know, I went through National Board for the 3rd time last year. Troy, I borrowed English classrooms, 8th grade, 9th grade classrooms all over the state. Not a single teacher told me I couldn't have his or her classroom for multiple days. So I'm maybe most proud of that I was able to go through National Board at the school level as a classroom teacher. I went through it as a curriculum director, at the district level. And then last year I was able to go through it, from the state level. So I just think that's cool. So I'm just happy to be here.
Well, we are glad to have you here. Thank you. And our last person I'm going to introduce is Mr. Hal Murphy. He is Retired educator with Etowah County Schools. He has been a band director, classroom teacher, an administrator of a high school, and a director of technology for our system. And Mr. Murphy, tell us a little bit. Turn your mic off. Your mic is still showing that it's not on. Okay, well, let's figure out how to fix that. Let's go ahead while he's working on his mic. He's glad to be here with us. Let's go ahead with our first question. We have just put together, the three of us, a set of questions, and we're dividing those off. And I'm going to go with the first one and direct it to anyone who wants to jump in. How does the director of curriculum, I guess this would be for you, Dr. Melissa, how does the director maintain an integrated curriculum, both horizontally and vertically aligned, that engages all students in rigorous and relevant academic challenges?
Not a loaded question at all. So one, you got to look at scope, because I work with schools our size, right? And then I work with Jefferson County that has 56 schools. And then I work with Midfield City that has 3, so you got to look at scope first, because when you're working with a school system that has 2 or 3 schools, we can make decisions on a Tuesday and roll with them on Wednesday. When you're working with a system that has lots of feeder patterns and lots of differences among them, the way you approach it is so different, which is, of course, the way it is in Etowah County. So one of the things I loved as a curriculum director is I felt like if we don't have teachers talking with one another and learning and growing in these really safe places, it doesn't matter what I say at the district level or what the state says. So as often as I could, remember we did just a ton of vertical and horizontal teams. I was shocked when I took that role in Etowah County that English teachers had across the district had never had an opportunity to sit in a room together. And I'm like, well, how many are there? And they're like, well, there's 40. I'm like, well, we can put 40 in a room, we can put 40 history teachers in a room. So trying to find as much opportunity to put teachers across the system with certificates and expertise in a room, probably one of the best things. Troy, I don't know if you remember this, but it was my favorite PLC, or we call them vertical teams, we did every year. And I didn't do anything. I told everybody to come with your favorite lesson. I'm like, come with that thing. Like, you wake up that morning, like, I'm doing that thing. And today, when you come to your vertical team, I'm put all 8th grade teachers together, all 9th grade teachers together, 11th grade teachers, and everybody has 15 minutes to share your thing. Here's the documents, here's whatever. And so everybody left with this awesome thing, and it empowered some of our new teachers, perhaps, and maybe some of our tier 3 teachers. Can I call them that? The ones that are like, I don't want to. And then they see someone like Troy who's doing all this awesome stuff, and they kind of feel, well, I gotta. You don't know what you don't know till you're sitting at a table and realize greatness, right? You think you're great. And then the other piece of that was, it was grueling, but when I tell people, we did this in Etowah County, they're like, well, how'd you do it? I'm like, we just did it. But all of these things, for there to be alignment at the curriculum level, I have to be in the classroom to see these things are happening, right? And to celebrate them. Remember, we used to do celebration tours. I was taking pictures and tagging people, and I even put the standard, Christy and I did Whitesboro, and I said, teacher, when I posted on social media, I even wrote what the standard was, because what I was trying to do is say, this is important work and this is how it's tied to our curriculum. But doing that in a way that's not policing, there's a little bit of a balance there, because when I took this role, there was a lot of paperwork with what they call them walkthrough forms and checklists and Dr. Cosby, I did it one time and I said, this isn't going to grow teaching. This is going to just build animosity. Like, what? That's no. So remember, we threw that out. We got rid of the boxes. I don't know if you guys are old enough to remember that, but I went and the boxes, chunk them. And I thought the State Department was going to come after me, and you know what? They did, but for a different reason. And so being able to do that and say, when we're in your classroom, we're not giving you scores. We're just looking for evidence of these things, and we really want to lift them up. That's why I call them celebration visits, because I was trying to celebrate the good work. So anytime we could do instructional rounds tied to that. And one of the things I left off, y'all, that I didn't get to do that I really wanted to do, and I've been able to do this in other districts, is that whole cognitive coaching piece, right? So like if I'm in Troy's classroom or Zach's classroom, I can say, hey, Troy, when I'm in your classroom, give me 3 things you want me to look for. So that gives him the power of saying, you know, instead of this checklist of 47 things or the CIP or whatever, this is something I've been working on. I went to PD last week on using Flipgrid or whatever, and just tell me what you think. And I think that way it kind of lessens that policing that we often do, and it makes it more of a reciprocal relationship. So those were things I was just always thinking about, how to bring everything full circle. But most importantly, whatever I do, I don't want to be the policeman in this, because when I'm in an AP science classroom, it's like Charlie Brown to me. I don't know. I don't know, you know, and I can't tell this teacher, but I know good practice when I see it. I know engagement when I see it. So how can I lift that up? I don't know if that answered your question.
Yes, that was great. Thank you.
It did answer the question. Thank you very much, and it leads us to the next question. And I think you probably answered a part of the question I'm about to ask in that one. But I also want to get the perspective of Mr. Elliott and Mr. Murphy as teacher and administrator. So this question is: how does the director and/or administrator lead and motivate teachers to adhere to the prescribed state standards? How do we make sure that we're sticking to those standards? And what are the perceptions of the teachers about that, about the expectations of sticking to the standards and still doing the things, being able to do the celebrations? So kind of a 2-part question. So Mr. Murphy, your part, if you wouldn't mind, how do you lead and motivate teachers to do that, to stick to the prescribed standards? And Mr. Elliott, you know, what's your take on that? What's your perceptions about how administrators try to get you to be sure that you're adhering to those standards? Y'all go ahead.
The best thing that I remember doing through that whole process was, like Melissa said, whenever we saw something good that was going on, we celebrated it. We shared it. We had them share with other people. And it was my philosophy, and Melissa's as well, when we were such a great team with other leaders in our district, that we celebrated everyone's successes and we shared those with each other. And that kind of success breeds success. Like she said, whenever we saw someone doing something good, we would share it with someone else, and they would say, hey, I could do that in my classroom, and that would help their students and their success. And for me, it was more focused on that than any standard or any prescribed practice. It was just trying to figure out how we could do better for our students in our classroom, as cliche as that sounds. We shared the good stuff going on in our system, in our schools, and there was so much. It really kind of spilled over district lines and over school boundaries to affect change in many other areas.
I think something that we do that, or kind of the way that we handle it at Sardis, is, for the most part, they allow us to work within the English teachers to get together and work together as a vertical team meeting or whatever you want within the school. Because our principal is a former English teacher, our assistant principal is a former math teacher. So he's not going to sit there and really be able to stress and go over the proper standards. And usually we're getting together and we're making sure that we're aligning on certain things in a broad sense. We're not going to go through the state standards or whatever, like individually, and make sure that we're, you know, knocking out this one and this one and this one. We're going to make sure that we're kind of building on what we need to be building on and things like that, and looking at things that we need to address, because there's always going to be some something we can do better. Obviously, you never arrive, but just getting with the other English teachers in the school and kind of talking about what works for us and what doesn't. I know I remember the meetings that we had where we had to that Dr. Shields was talking about, where we had to introduce lessons, and that was like my second year teaching, and it scared everything. I was a wreck going into that because I feel like I've got this little rinky-dink lesson going into it. But doing that, or just within the school, just when I'm talking about teaching Romeo and Juliet to ninth graders, and we're talking about comparing that to Hamlet or Macbeth in the 11th or 12th grade, and we're talking about some of the same concepts we're trying to teach and some of the ways we get that across, that's worked really well for us. And that's because the administrators sort of let us shape, or they might nudge us in the direction we need to go from time to time based on the data they're getting, but they also let us kind of work within our own groups, and that seems to be successful for us.
I like that. I think the central thing that I'm hearing and everything that everybody's saying is, communication and celebrating the good, not making it nose to the grindstone all the time, because we know it's hard work already, but being able to have some autonomy in your classroom and then celebrate and communicate, I think that's the central thing that I'm hearing from y'all. Thank you very much.
And I know both of you there's a little bit of overlap with what I'm fixing to ask you guys, but and I think all three of you can probably contribute to this in some manner, but to what level or to what degree are teachers involved in curriculum decisions or giving feedback on curriculum decisions or things of that nature? If you're members of CIP or whatnot, just to what manner or degree are teachers involved in that process?
I remember this is going into my 30th year of education, which is crazy because I feel like such a young person still. But when I was a classroom teacher, no one asked. They didn't ask about textbooks. They didn't, I just wasn't, here it is. And I think I always felt so far removed from the curriculum. And so I just shut the door and taught the way I thought my kids needed to learn, and kids grew, And so I really kept that mindset, throughout the leadership roles, that I've had. Because if the teachers aren't part of the conversation, then they're not going to receive the conversation. It's going to be foreign. It's someone else did this to me, and it becomes a compliance piece, and which is a huge problem in education anyway. I think we would all agree, like, here's the thing, do it. And so, but once again, it goes back to scope. When you're in a big district, it's, I remember when we were adopting, when we went to the Common Core, the first go around with reading. And I don't remember, Christy, if you were part of any of those textbook adoption meetings, but wow. I mean, I was a referee, and Mr. Bottoms is a lot nicer than I am. So I had to be like the meanie, and be like, separate. And so, but what it taught me is, if we only bring people together every time we have a textbook adoption to discuss curriculum, we're not teaching structures, we're not teaching, resilience in these discussions and stamina and what that looks like when you're talking about curriculum that you have really strong opinions about. So are teachers involved in curriculum? I would say, because I'm looking at the questions, I would say not nearly enough. Should they be? They're the persons they're the folks that are delivering it. So certainly they should be, but also when we've got Go Math or Wonders or whatever, we say, here the program is, here's the curriculum, here's your course of study, your standards, whatever, and here's the 87 manipulatives, web tools, RTI stuff that comes with it. Have at it. We're going to do a 1 hour training. We got to do better than that. So I think we need to infuse the first thing we were talking about, those POCs. There should be many lessons part of that, or many discussions, little nuggets along the way. So we're not trying to muscle everybody up at the beginning of the year with everything they have to know. Because how many of us have gone through a curriculum training, and then you get into your classroom with the curriculum, and then you really have questions because you didn't know to ask the questions when they first shared it with you. So that I would say that's one of the biggest gaps, Holly, in education, is that teachers are not part of that discussion, either the creating, the culling, or curating, whatever you want to call it, of the material and the curriculum. It's more of a here it is, do it. And remember, I work with all schools, but I prioritize my time with the lowest performing, the failing, the the CSI schools. And the reason teachers don't stay in many of these schools is because someone said a minute ago, they don't have autonomy. It is day one, you teach this, day two, you teach this, and you know, who wants to be a robot in a classroom with kids that are already struggling?
No, I agree with that too. I think another problem that comes with teachers being involved in choosing curriculum and that sort of thing, just to build on what you said, is you've got to consider that our special education teachers are also teaching this curriculum. We're having to pick up the slack where the child is not getting what they need. Not that the classroom teacher isn't doing a great job. That's not it. But I can tell you, in 28 years of being in special education, never once have I been asked to attend a curriculum adoption meeting. And we have requested that before. I taught at one of our biggest elementary schools in a self-contained class for a long time and was never asked to be a part of that. And it would have really been a joy for me to get to be involved in choosing those and everything. And the folks that they did ask to be a part of that were great people. But I think there's another voice here that's not heard when it comes to picking out what we're going to teach and how we're going to do it. So that brings me to my next question, and this is for Mr. Murphy or Dr. Shields, either one. How does the director or administrator assess instructional programs, activities, and materials? Some of that kind of goes along with what we've said, but I'd be interested to hear your take.
I'll jump in there. So I used and continue to use lots of resources. One that is my go-to is What Works Clearinghouse. I'm sure y'all have seen that 100 times, but you can go to this website and you can plug in anything, any type of curriculum, textbook, even a lot of some strategy, and it will give you evidence on student impact, and as well as just some kind of empirical evidence of how it's been used successfully in other parts of the country. And then there is another site that's kind of new. It's called Evidence for ESSA. If you're not familiar with that, it's newer than What Works Clearinghouse. I usually vet if someone's talking about a new curriculum. I will go to both of those first. I will add just a little caveat to that. Sometimes new programs come out that are amazing, right? And they haven't been vetted through What Works Clearinghouse yet, or Evidence for ESSA. So I'm really careful not to say, well, it's not there, so you shouldn't use it, because Troy has heard me say this a lot of times in our vertical team meetings, but best practices are born because someone shut the door and broke the rules and did something different, and it worked. Otherwise, we'd be doing everything the same way all the time. So a best practice is really born from rebelling, if you want to look at it that way. And so some of these things that are emerging, particularly with everything going on now, I said I'm really careful not to say, well, don't use that, because I didn't see that there. But if I know it's something that's kind of been around. And then anecdotal evidence, we get so locked up on, is this peer reviewed? And I know what classes y'all are in, and I know y'all hear this stuff 100 times, and what evidence supports this. But there's a lot to be said with connecting with friends that are using something in another district that have their story, their truth to share. And many times I value that from seeing their data. I'm thinking of a great example, Albertville City. They have a whole school that's a kindergarten, like the whole, I think it's Big Spring Lake or something. And they're doing just these amazing things. And so like they're doing like school within a school at several of their schools, and they just like John Jones when we have pods. Well, they have that again. And so they got 2 kindergarten classes happening at the same time, led by a math expert and a literacy expert. And they're tag teaming all day. And he was sharing with me the data with that compared to just the data of the traditional. It was amazing. So that's going to hit my heart in a very different way than something I read online about specific curricula. So I kind of look at it from both. I want to see something that I've got some evidence to support it, but I want to talk to people who've actually used it, who have schools that look like mine, with resources like mine, before I jump into it.
Absolutely.
Well, it's interesting that you're talking about the data, because as we know, data drives lots of things. And I agree with you. I think the experiences that we share as professionals are sometimes the best data and what we see happening in front of us. But how, as a director, administrator, do you use diagnostic tools? Because we know we have to have that standard, other than just opinions, to assess, identify, and support instructional improvement. And teachers, Mr. Elliott, are you involved in that process of assessing how well your students are performing, and what diagnostic tools do you use to do that?
I'll go ahead. I've said in meet, usually the data is presented to us, and then we take it to like a vertical team meeting or something like that within the school, where we're talking about, okay, this is what we're showing, this is what we need to do better, and things like that. Usually not much more than being presented with the data and looking at, various the technology, or the program escapes my mind right now, but the various ways we can look at the standards that were tested successfully, that students performed well on, or things like that is typically now this year will be interesting, because there was no it's just a big question mark, but that seems to be the theme of the year anyway. But yeah, just looking at the data, and then getting together and talking about what we need to do to improve on is my experience with it.
But y'all, I gotta tell you, I have been pulling back the layers of this whole data thing, because I go into schools where the kids are doing nothing but testing all the time, and I hate that. It's so wrong. It's education malpractice. It's not teaching. It's not teaching. And so I've become a bit of a I don't know, that's one of my soapboxes. When I'm in a teacher's classroom, or I'm working with a group of teachers, and I ask them, well, tell me about your formative assessments. Oh, we do STAR and we do DIBELS. And I'm like, that's not a formative assessment. I suppose you could argue that it's a bit of a benchmark assessment. No, I'm talking about when I'm teaching indirect objects and gerunds, and my kids don't get it, and I change on a dime because I did this formative assessment, whatever it is. I don't even care what it is. And when I say to them, no, I'm talking about the formative assessments that don't have numbers, they're like, oh, you can have that? I'm like, that's it. That is what I see. We've lost this somehow, that we thought with No Child Left Behind, we were getting away from data. Remember that? When we were like, focus on the standards and strategies and discussions. And somehow in the last couple of years, I feel like we've returned to that mentality. But I'll tell you one thing that was really powerful that I did at one of the schools in Edward County that I will not name. But it wasn't Sardis. But it was a high school. Narrow it down. And they thought they were doing pretty good, right? Because the overall data looked all nice, like the numbers, they're not on any kind of list, and everything was like gravy. And then I pulled, Holly, the special ed and the EL numbers. And what I was able, when I put this on the screen, and they saw, oh, look, we're higher than the state average. Good. And then when I pulled up their special ed and EL numbers, they were significantly below the state line. But because they didn't have a large population of special ed and EL, they just kind of got lost in that. And you could have heard a pin drop when I put that data up there. That the kids were not only coming to us, they weren't just not on the state, on par with the state. They were actually decreasing. Like, how's it? You have to even try to do that. And so having those kind of discussions about looking at the subgroups that we have that we're not meeting, and then looking at and talking about diagnostic tools, I was with a county that's just like ours, also in North Alabama. I had about 7 high school principals, and we were working together. And I asked one principal, I said, very rural, I said, well, tell me, what are you guys doing with like advanced placement, dual enrollment, college prep stuff? And he said, well, we don't do none of that. He said, 85% of our kids graduated with honors last year. We don't need that. And I'm like, in the back of my mind, I'm like, 85% of your kids graduated with an A or a B. Like, I am not a math teacher, but I know statistically that should not be possible. So I go to real data, which is college remediation data that every single high school in the state I can look up, and you can, and everybody can. Every second of every day, I have a whole data site if you're ever interested on every piece of data we all have access to that people didn't even know we had. And I pull up their college remediation data. I'll never forget it. 67% of his kids that went to college, that's just the college going kids, had to take remedial math and or English. But yet 85% of them graduated with an A or B. So I don't need to look at STAR. I don't have to look at ACT. I'm looking at these mamas and dads are paying, what, $2,000 for their kids to take remedial English classes because we gave them a 90, which is also education malpractice on our part. So looking at programs is far beyond just the STAR and the summative assessments. And that's where I think we hinge our focus maybe too much, because many of these are just a one day in time type thing, and not focusing on those benchmark assessments, but doing it in a way that gives teachers ownership. Like when I'm in my ELA classroom, I would got angry when they kept telling me I had to send my kids to go take these tests. And I'm like, you're telling me the kids are going to miss my awesomeness for an hour today so that they can go take a test. And I can tell you right now where every single one of them are. Like, why would you do that? And I'm being funny, but it's serious, right? We're removing kids from valuable instructions to take a test that we may or may not even look at the data. So those are conversations I think we had. But how I did it was trying the data. I wanted it to be real data. If Troy or Zach or anyone had gone through a training or a PLC or whatever, when I'm in the classroom, the data I'm collecting is evidence of those things happening. I want to see a return on investment, that the time, whether it's money or physical investment, the stuff that we're putting in place, I can see it in action and I can give feedback, celebrate that. I feel like that data is often much more powerful than putting kids in front of a computer and dibbling them to death. And let me just say one other thing. The meeting I just got out of, I just shared this. I met a kindergarten teacher the other day before the world stopped. And her principal had come to her and told her that she had 100% of her kids dibble in benchmark in dibble math and reading. Her school, they do dibbles in math and reading. I don't dibble, Christy. I never dibbled, but I know it's not fun. And so she was telling me this, and she said, I know I should be really proud of this, because he's saying, and he told her she's the only kindergarten teacher in the whole team that had 100% of her kids benchmark in both. And then she said, can I tell you something? She said, I was a better teacher last year because I knew my kids. This year I could say, Troy is a 2.2. Zach, she said, I knew every second of every day where they were on that spectrum for dibbles. So I knew them that way. And I was so hyper focused on moving them up because this is so important at my school. Whereas last year I took things slower. I knew my kids. And I hadn't forgotten that, y'all. I told her, I said, that might be the most important thing I've heard this year.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to sort of shift gears a little bit and just go back to sort of a question regarding technology. So how has the infusion there of technology being brought into the classroom, either at the school level or at the district level or even at the state level, what impact, if any, or I know there is an impact, but what impact has technology had on curriculum?
Well, the biggest and reason I raised my hand is because I was real passionate about this. We have so many teachers that say, oh, well, I use technology in my classroom. I use it, and it's a whiteboard. or, oh yeah, we use technology all the time, and it's some other little program. The thing that I really tried to push, and I don't know if I was successful with this, was technology is a tool. It's not the means. It helps you get to a certain place. It's another resource for you to use. And too often, I would come across people that really didn't know what or how. You know, we were great. We had all of these Promethean boards in all of our elementary schools, and so many people were using them so well. Some people were just using them as a whiteboard. So it's the proper use, I guess is a good way to put it. The effective use of technology enhances what a good teacher already does, if that makes sense. And to real quick go back to one thing about the data, or data, however you say it. One thing that I would add to what Melissa said, I talked to our own kids about it, our own two at home. I would ask them how, what did you think? How do you do this? And get them to show me. And if they thought it was really good, then it was pretty good. And if they thought it was kind of stupid, then pretty much it was. So anyway, I just wanted to go back there. But effective use of technology, you know, that's a cliche term, but it's really something, like I said, that goes along with good instruction. It makes good teachers even better. It's not going to make a bad teacher a good teacher. Sorry.
I agree with what he said. I got a class set of Chromebooks for the first time last year, and it was like 2 weeks before we got out, before everything shut down. So it was kind of interesting. The first time we broke them out actually was when we realized that something may happen, and I was making sure that everybody was signed in to Google Classroom and everything before we got out for the big break. And my 5-year-old is breaking out of his room right now, so if he comes in here, that may be something. But but I never felt like having that. Like my 3rd year teaching, I was able to get a Promethean board, just the various things like that. I never felt like it. I felt like I am who I am in a classroom, and I'm learning more effective ways to get across what I'm trying to teach. I'm becoming a more effective teacher, but in the same way, I was becoming a more effective teacher when I was sitting in to those meetings and listening to all these other teachers present these lessons. It's just a tool. If you're a bad teacher, then you're going to be a bad teacher with computers, or you're going to be a bad teacher without computers, or whatever technology you want to use. I think that that creativity kind of breeds creativity in a sense. So when I listen to another teacher talk about a lesson that they do, and I want to use that in my classroom, I want to put my own spin on it. And it's the same way with technology. I think if I see something that somebody's doing, if I learn a way to do something new, utilizing technology in the classroom, if it's making students more technologically literate, I think that's just a bonus added on to it most of the time, and that's necessary. But I think that the tools that we use in the classroom can make us more effective teachers. They make us more effective at teaching our curriculum. I just don't necessarily know if it makes us better, because I think a lot of times if you're good, you're good, and that means you're using this stuff effectively. And if you're bad, you're just going to kind of use it as a crutch.
I think you're right about that. You're exactly right about that, both of you. So let's think about it in a different way. And let me pull my question back up so I don't lose it. This is for Dr. Shields, or for Troy, or for Mr. Murphy, either one. How has technology and the transition to online virtual learning during this COVID-19 period been a catalyst for curriculum changes on the global or on the local or the state level?
Well, there are no words. I mean, it's just, it's been unbelievable. We all feel like we're in an education twilight zone. the disparity of access across the state, I think, is now more widely evident than ever before. You know, the first couple weeks of this, I think all I did night and day was just try to get kids fed. I mean, I totally shifted from talking about reading and math and curriculum to talking to food banks all over the state and churches and just making sure we've got food coming, you know, and we kept saying, like, we spent 60 hours this week trying to feed kids. And then, of course, we shifted to, okay, so we kind of got this, and now how do we teach them? And just putting technology in the hands of these kids, I mean, the kids have to be trained in how to use it just like the adults do. And so going into this, I guess, Holly, we talking about moving now, or just how has it changed, you know, in entirety? It's just, we have to move into this hybrid virtual world, whether we want to or not, with so many unknowns. But there are so many teachers who are very resistant to using technology, and they can't be. Now, I will tell you what some schools are doing that I think is pretty smart. I met with about 15 curriculum directors yesterday from North Alabama, and they were doing some really neat things. But some are saying, so like, like Christy, like Whitesboro, how many third grade teachers you got? Yeah, like 5 or something. I'm trying to think how many. Okay, 3. So let's say you have one, she's just a techie. You're going to be like, okay, Melissa, you're going to be my third grade virtual teacher. The other 2 are going to be, we're calling it mask to mask because it is not face to face. We can say it's face to face all we want to, but it's not. You know, it's going to be mask to mask instruction, and that's very different. So schools are looking at and to those teachers that have the heart to be the techie folks, to say, you are going to be the virtual teacher for this, so that teachers aren't teaching all day long, first grade or 8th grade or 10th grade, and then going home and trying to teach to the 4 or 5 or 15 kids that could not participate. Some things that have happened have been hadn't thought about that. Like initially when we started talking about starting this year, there was a lot of discussion about putting webcams or something like that in the classroom and having synchronous streaming from the classroom to the home, so that teachers could just do one lesson. But then there's so many opportunities for FERPA and HIPAA violations that can happen unless you have, the camera focused on the teacher at the Promethean board, all day long. He has to be still, and that's not, So there's been a lot of pulling back of some wonders, even. So some of the learning is not online, but it certainly is remote. Can I use that expression? So schools that don't have one-to-one initiatives, they don't have the opportunity for virtual learning. So here are a couple of things we found out really quick. A lot of districts had polled their families to say, how many of you have internet access? And even our most rural, high-poverty districts are really thinking they were in a good spot, because the polls came back that 90% of their families had internet access. But what they were talking about was this. Someone in the house has a phone. So the question really should have been access, because what we found is parents were having to say, okay, Christy's in AP English, and I have a 3rd grader and I got a kindergartner. So AP English, I got to prioritize, you get the phone today. If a parent could even give up his or her phone. And then you two will get to you when we can. So there was just this massive, those first few weeks, like, no, they don't have access. They have one device, an iPad maybe, and they're having to take turns. So we learned quickly, you can't have synchronous learning in most scenarios, because kids are at a grandparent's house, they're babysitting brothers and sisters, there's one device. So whatever we do, if it is synchronous, we have to record it so that those kids that are in whatever situations at home have access to it. So there's that. And then the remote learning piece became a bit of an because everybody's doing all these packets. I don't know if y'all do that in Edward County, like packet. And I don't even know, we know packets don't work, but whatever. So we did that. And then the teachers are like, all this stuff is coming out about COVID-19 and how you get it. And the teachers are like, listen, I can control how clean it is when the parents get it. after it's been on the kitchen table for a week, everybody's been coughing on it, it's got food leftovers, and it comes back to my house with my 5-year-old and my mother who's sick, I don't want that back in my house. So all of these things that we did initially, we started having what's a plan B for that? So I think, Holly, to answer your question I think it revealed a lot of things we had never even considered before. But I also think our legislature, I think our lawmakers have realized the disparity of access to the internet that we have across the state. And if anything, I really expect to see funding, whether it's through education or through some sort of other, opportunity, is that we're going to have some sort of broadband opportunities, Wi-Fi in these really rural parts of our state.
I think that would really be great to have that. I know you're talking about things that we had to do in special ed. It does concern me about how we're going to go forth and move forward with this, because we've got so many therapies where I don't care what our federal Department of Education says. There are just things that have to be done face to face. That just can't be done over a computer or over a telephone or even in a paper pencil packet. There are just things with our special needs students that have to have human interaction. So it does concern me how we're going to move forward in carrying this out. But thank you for your answer. I thought it was great.
Yes. Well, you definitely, Melissa, have talked about some of the difficulties that we're facing with technology. But in your position as the director or working with curriculum across the state, and this is your opinion, what is the greatest difficulty of your position? And there's a two-part, but answer that one first.
The greatest difficulty is just like it was in Etowah County, but I'm kind of that person, like if you put me over trash cans, like I'm going to be like all in, I'm going to give 60 hours a week to trash cans. And you all are that way too. But just for me, just trying to keep a pulse of all the needs everywhere all the time and being responsive to that. I've always been answer your email, in 24 hours. I have the whole state. I work with every district. Yesterday I had 12 straight hours of Zoom, 12 straight. I had 20 minutes from 12 o'clock to 12:20 was the only break I had. And because I'm just doing so much stuff right now. And so I am not responsive like I want to be, because when I'm in a situation like this, I want to give you 100%. So my emails are just stacking up. I think we had this wrong impression that, oh, cool, we'll be at home and working. Well, what that does is it means you're working all day long, and you don't stop. And then you're like, okay, well, now I got to do the paperwork because I've been doing face-to-face stuff all day long. The other difficulties of my job, and I found this in my old job in Etowah County and this job, is each year I feel further removed from the classroom to the thing that put me in this role. And so I try to do everything I can to keep my head straight as a classroom teacher. I feel like the reason I've enjoyed any kind of success as a administrator, if I have, is because I look through the lens of a teacher. I think like a teacher, and I'm really proud of that. I don't want to be, I never wanted to be in kind of policeman for education. I just wanted to be a friend. So the difficulties are just with everything happening. I feel as though I'm much like you guys, just trying to keep my head above water, and I'm playing Whack-A-Mo, or what's that game, you hit this and another thing pops up, and I feel like I'm doing that every day. Yeah,
I agree. And the second part of that question was the factors that interfere with achieving goals and objectives. And the difficulties may actually be the answer to that second part, but what factors do you feel that interfere most with achieving the goals and objectives that we have?
Lots of distractions from like the feds, there's just all these things we have to do, mandates and constraints that sometimes I'm like, there's just a lot of red tape taking our eyes off the real work. And I'm not blaming anybody, because you get money, you got to do stuff. That's the way it is with federal dollars. Getting distracted from the real work, sometimes I have to recenter myself and say I'm spending way too much human energy on this thing when I need to peel back the layers. Personnel issues. I mean, I have to deal with a lot of and I'm like, just be nice to each other, you know, or just, I mean, like, we don't have time for that. I'm like, we got other things. So, I mean, I had that when I was, you know, in Etowah County. I have that, you know, in this role, either if I'm working with principals who have resistant, you know, teachers, or in, you know, my role in working with, you know, folks at the department. And then some of the factors that I find in my role at the department, if I could be completely transparent, is the whole "we've always done it this way" mentality. You know, well, this is how we did it, and you know, and I kind of I know my buddies, they've heard me say this at the state court all the time, but I know when I'm invited to a meeting, they're like, "Oh God, I hope that Shields woman doesn't come today," because my famous statement is, "That's not real school." I say that all the time. That's not real school. That's not Sardis. That might be a Trustful. That might be a Pisgah. But what that scenario is not reasonable to ask teachers or principals or district leaders to do that. So just trying to get through some, you know, some mindsets. And, you know, Dr. Mackey has hired some awesome folks that, you know, I love sitting at the table and, you know, having thought partners like that. But when you are working with low performing schools, y'all, and the teachers don't believe they can impact learning because the kids can't, it's like hitting a brick wall. You know, well, these kids are poor and these kids are that. And I'm like, if you don't believe that you can impact learning, then you're not. I mean, and so I see that with, you know, and I'm working, you know, a lot of work right now with social justice and all the, you know, issues that we're facing. And a meeting I had this morning was with African American teachers, and, you know, we were talking about, you know, when you're a white teacher teaching in a predominantly Black school, and, you know, all the things that kind of come along with that. And she made a good point. She said African American teachers have low expectations of African American students in these low performing schools, you know. And she's like, she says, I have to recognize that in myself and in my peers, that it's not a white, brown, or Black thing. It's we think these kids are poor and we think this is a low performing school. So getting past or creating high expectations, or maybe I should say, Holly, getting past low expectations for both the kids and for us as teachers.
Well, I'll jump in right here, and I'd like to. This pretty well answers all the questions that we've got for you guys. We really appreciate your time. I know, Dr. Shields, you're extremely busy based on what you just said with how overloaded your email inbox is and how much time you're dedicating to your profession. And so we greatly appreciate you guys, Mr. Elliott, Mr. Murphy, for sitting in with us today. And at this time, I'll turn it back over to Holly and let her close this out or whatever. But I wanted to personally thank you guys.
Well, I just thank you guys so much. It's been such a treat to get sit and visit with all of you. I'm thrilled to be in this field, and every day it becomes more challenging, but it also tells me with the changes that I'm right where I need to be. So I'm really thankful to get to work with all of you. Thank you so much for being a part of this today, and we'll let you get back to your regularly scheduled programming. Y'all have a great day. Thank you.
It's great to see you guys. Good luck to you. Have fun in class.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Okay, I'm going to email it. Stop. Well, hang on. Okay.